Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Journey into Marvel. If this is your first time tuning in, I'll try to explain what this show is all about. For some reason, I'm attempting to read through all of Marvel's main universe comics, starting in 1961 and continuing to the present. So far, I'm over 900 issues in, and I've been reading them for a little over a year. I decided to do this podcast because I thought it'd be fun to document my progress and share my newfound love of comics with fellow nerds all around the world. Currently, the format for this show is to give a short synopsis and review of each issue that I read. As I talk, I'll be flipping through that issue and discussing some random things that I liked or didn't like. Alright, with all that out of the way, how about we finally talk about some comics? First off, we've got Captain America number 109 from January 1969. This one's sort of a flashback issue, which I really enjoy. It's produced by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, the dynamic duo themselves. So starting off here, we're thrown into a battle with Captain America and Bucky, kicking some Nazi ass, so right away this tells us this is a flashback issue. A few pages later, we find out that Captain America is retelling an old war story to Nick Fury. He then goes on to explain his origin story, which, as far as I remember, has not yet been retold since his Golden Age comic book series. I think. Don't quote me on that, though. For those of you who don't know Captain America's origin story, it goes a little something like this. A skinny kid named Steve Rogers tries to enlist in the military, but is deemed way too scrawny. Because of his determination, he is chosen to be the first in a line of new super soldiers. After that procedure, Steve emerges as a huge buff dude. All of a sudden, this Nazi guy who infiltrated the lab shoots and kills Professor Reinstein, who was the creator of the super soldier serum. And without him, no new super soldiers can be created. Steve Rogers becomes Captain America and before long is discovered by Bucky Barnes. Bucky and Cap team up to fight the Nazis before Bucky's untimely death at the hands of the Red Skull himself. And it kind of ends with Captain America looking all gloomy like he normally does and reminiscing about Bucky. So a few things that I liked. I really enjoyed these flashback issues for some reason, especially the ones that call back to the Golden Age comics. They're pretty cool since I didn't actually read through the Golden Age stuff. And you gotta love seeing Captain America doing what he does best, punching Nazis right in their face. Always love seeing that. There's another thing I wanted to talk about here. Yeah, the art on page 18, panel 2, shows the silhouette of Captain America in the background with an unconscious Nazi in the foreground. And I think that's really cool. It's a really cool panel. Really shows off Jack Kirby's talent. I don't necessarily like how he draws people, but I like this panel and I like how he draws certain things like machines and stuff. There's not really anything that I disliked here. I mean, unless you're not a fan of flashback issues, and some people aren't. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, just because it's not really anything new, but I liked it anyway. Next up, we've got Captain Marvel number 8 from December 1968. Right away on the cover here, I see Captain Marvel as Walter Lawson, kind of running away from this big purple robot-looking guy, with Captain Marvel big and green in the background. It's a pretty cool cover. We'll see how this actual issue goes here. Looks like this one was written by Arnold Drake and penciled by Don Heck himself. My man. So, first page here, the splash page, we've got these yellow-skinned, blue-haired Simpsons-looking guys. Looks like they've discovered the Kree ship. They're pissed about that. They're going after the Kree, and then Captain Marvel and Jan Rog go after them, kick some ass. What are these aliens called here? Akon. We're going to call them Akon. That's what the Simpsons are. Akon. Okay. So Captain Marvel ends up finding Walter Lawson's secret base eventually, with all this sort of crazy technology going on, and a big, looks like a mold for a giant robot. So who knows what the real Dr. Lawson was actually up to here. And then we find these two agent guys, these evil agents, breaking in to Walter Lawson's hideout, led by this fat, gross guy named Number One. He must be the leader of this group. They're defeated by Captain Marvel, it looks like, and they were looking for some big robot thing in order to kill Walter Lawson. And I think they must have ended up activating it, because I think that's the whole conflict of this issue here. Yeah, looks like it. So, Captain Marvel comes back to base, and he makes out with Carol Danvers for a little bit, because we need some of that in Marvel Comics. And looks like the Kree love interest, whose name I can't remember here, Medic Yuna, she gets a little jealous by that, because she has a thing for Marvel. Oh, and then this big robot guy, he's smashing everything. He's looking for Walter Lawson. He's kicking ass. He's smashing cars. Bullets bouncing off of him. Yep. Him and Captain Marvel end up fighting. This big robot guy. I don't remember the big robot's name, but he is not purple as it appears on the cover. He's instead silver like a normal robot. It looks like his name is CyberX. So CyberX and Captain Marvel. Big fight. He eventually wins, leaves CyberX in a big smoking heap, but at the very end, CyberX starts a self-repair sequence, and we'll see what happens next issue, huh? Overall, this was a pretty standard issue of Captain Marvel. There was a lot of cool action sequences with fighting the robot. There was the introduction of the new character, Number One. He seems like he's going to be a big bad or a big villain for Captain Marvel in the coming issues here. We were introduced to the Akon, which is a cool race of aliens. Some things I disliked, though, about this, it sort of felt like a filler issue, despite the introduction of a couple new characters and races and stuff. It didn't really have that same sense of plot progression, and there was no real stakes with Captain Marvel as far as his allegiance to the Kree goes. It was actually a pretty safe-feeling issue compared with previous ones where the stakes have been a little higher. I would rate Captain Marvel number 8 3 out of 5 stars. Continuing on where we left off, we've got Captain Marvel number 9 from January of 1969. This issue was written by Arnold Drake and penciled by Don Heck, just like the last one. And the first thing I notice here is the cover. We've got Captain Marvel fighting the Akon again, but for some reason, the aliens are colored like old Caucasian men, with white skin and gray hair instead of yellow skin and blue hair. I'm not sure why this coloring error occurred, but I am glad it happened because it's really funny. So turning the page, we get to the splash page here, and we see the aliens colored correctly. Yellow skin, blue hair, and they're fighting Captain Marvel. Got a pretty good action sequence here before the APB shows up, and Captain Marvel throws a smoke bomb, obscures everything from sight, and then flies away. We cut to Carol Danvers trying to sneak into Walter Lawson's hotel room, and she's looking for any sort of evidence that he is doing something wrong or might even be an alien. And all of a sudden, CyberX comes back from the dead, breaks through the hotel room, and steals Carol Danvers, and tries to use her to lure Walter Lawson into his clutches because he still is single-minded and wants to kill Walter Lawson. I'm also noticing there's no Number One in this issue, that crime boss from the last one. Maybe he wasn't as big as I thought, but it looked like he was going to be set up for a few issue arc here at least. So, Captain Marvel again sets out looking for Carol Danvers, and in the meantime, Jan Rog is beaming the location of Captain Marvel to the Akon aliens, and they're on the lookout for him too. So we've got two sets of bad guys essentially looking out for Captain Marvel. And Captain Marvel ends up finding Carol Danvers and CyberX, and another awesome battle occurs. Pretty soon the Akon show up. They've found Captain Marvel too, and they start fighting CyberX, also thinking he's an ally of Captain Marvel. So They end up beating CyberX, apparently, and Captain Marvel rescues Carol Danvers, and the aliens are starting to rain down their ray blasts onto Captain Marvel. And they end up hitting him, despite Carol Danvers' warning. They find a notepad on him with code Z19 written on it. Now, this must be something the Akon want from the Kree for some reason. But CyberX and his self-repairing mini robots ends up waking up and destroying the Akon before they can even use that little book. And then Captain Marvel wakes up and, using his amazing U-beam, ends up defeating CyberX once and for all, allegedly. He even squishes the little chance he has to self-repair by destroying the self-repair unit. And we end with Medic Una looking all sad because of Carol Danvers yet again. So this was a pretty good issue. This one felt a little more like filler than the last one, though, because we didn't even get a real continuation of that whole number one plot that we started last issue. I guess this kind of settles the whole Akon CyberX side of things, though. Maybe we'll get a little more with that secretive organization in the next issue here. So I don't know. This one was okay. I liked it a little bit better than the last one, just because of the whole kind of warring aliens versus the CyberX perspective there. But it was also not the best issue of Captain Marvel, so I'll go ahead and give this one a 3 out of 5 stars, just because I liked it, but again, it didn't really feel like it was advancing the plot at all. So, well, I guess we'll just see what happens in the coming issues. Next, we finally got another issue of Iron Man. I feel like it's been a long time since I've actually read one of these, and they're some of my favorites, so I'm kind of excited to read these next couple issues. So, we've got Iron Man number 7, and this one's from, let me see, I think November 1968. And this one was written by Archie Goodwin, and the art was done by George Tuska. On the cover, we've got Iron Man facing off with the Gladiator, who's ripping through the Iron Man logo. It's actually pretty cool. I like the Gladiator a lot. He was a Daredevil villain previous to this issue, so he's a lot of fun. So we'll see what kind of shenanigans he gets into here. The Magia Strikes. The Magia is this group. They're supposed to be like the Mafia, I think. That's why I pronounce it Magia, but I really don't know. So if it's pronounced some other way, by all means, let me know. So the Magia Strikes. Right away, we see some Magia agents seemingly blasting into Stark Industries until it's revealed that that was just a training exercise put on by Big M, who is that female leader of the Magia that we've been seeing for the past few issues. And I haven't actually talked about them on the podcast yet, but we'll be seeing a lot more of her, I think. So they're training, and all of a sudden Iron Man bursts in, and everybody's fooled. They think it's the real Iron Man, but it's actually just a replica. The Gladiator comes in, swoops down, cuts up this Iron Man, and everybody's satisfied. And then there's a cool flashback sequence of the Gladiator fighting Daredevil, which I really like. I know I keep talking about how much I like these flashback sequences and all, but they're really cool, and they help people who aren't like me, who haven't been reading everything, to kind of catch up and see where these characters have been. So it's revealed that the Gladiator's gotten some suit upgrades from his last boss. Another thing I want to point out with Big M is that she is in love with Jasper Sitwell, the super nerdy S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who's currently working for Tony Stark at Stark Industries. So she doesn't really want to go through with the whole plan of breaking in and stealing or doing whatever they're doing to Stark Industries. So she's been trying to delay it as long as possible, but the introduction of the Gladiator kind of puts that to the side. So finally we get to Tony Stark himself, and he is in contact with Janice, Janice Cord, I believe is her name, and she is the daughter of some villain, I think, from an issue a little ways back. It doesn't really matter too much what she is, but she is selling her father's old laboratory to Tony Stark, and Stark is going to go look at it. And then they end up getting captured by the Maggia and held prisoner. Tony Stark escapes. Everyone thinks he's a coward, but he's really just changing into Iron Man, who then proceeds to kick all the gunmen's asses and save the day. He saves Janice Cord and the lawyer guy. I don't remember his name. Vincent something or other. He saves them from getting crushed by a big metal box, but ends up crushing his own hand in the process. And so he's fighting the Gladiator. The Gladiator and him are trading blows pretty much evenly, and Iron Man goes to use one of his repulsor blasts, and he can't do it. And that's where the issue ends. Overall, this was a pretty good issue, fairly standard when it comes to Iron Man. One good thing I did like, he did not run out of electricity and have to try and go plug himself in before he had a heart attack. God, I'm sick of that plot point. But anyway, this was a good one. There's not really too much that I could complain about even, but also nothing really stood out as super wonderful. I mean, it was pretty good all around, but it felt sort of standard. So I'll give this one 4 out of 5 stars. Directly following that last issue, we've got Iron Man number 8 from December of 1968. And that one was written and drawn by the exact same people as last time, so no need to go over that again. So, as we saw in the last issue, Iron Man's repulsor beams are not functioning, so he has to keep fighting the Gladiator without them. This battle goes on for a few pages before we see the Maggia breaking into Stark Industries finally, gassing the security guards and approaching the weapons vault. We then finally get some more exposition and backstory regarding Big M, which was very welcome, as she was kind of a mysterious character in these past few issues. So she was the daughter of a wealthy businessman, never wanting for anything and living a life of luxury. After her father's death, she finds out that she is really the daughter of the former Maggia leader, Count Nefaria. She tries to escape her destiny, but ends up embracing her Maggia training and is groomed to be the next leader after her real father. Flashing forward, Iron Man and Gladiator are continuing their battle, with Gladiator putting up a much harder fight than I originally thought he would. He seemed kind of a pushover in those old Daredevil comics, but I guess he kind of learned a lesson here because he's kicking butt. Iron Man rescues Janice Cord and the lawyer guy before pursuing an escaped Gladiator back to Stark Industries. After successfully breaking into the vault, the Maggia finds it to be a trap orchestrated by Jasper Sitwell, who knew all along that his love interest was Big M. Just before Gladiator can attack Sitwell, Big M shoots one of his wrist blades off, distracting him long enough for Iron Man to step in and finish the job. So with Gladiator defeated, Agent Sitwell has a clear shot at an escaping Big M. He ends up letting her go and not taking the shot, probably due to his lingering feelings. So this was a great issue. I didn't really have a whole lot of things that I didn't like about it. So a few things that I did enjoy was the Gladiator was a much bigger threat than I thought he was going to be. Like I said before, he was kind of a pushover, or so it seemed in those earlier issues. And I honestly didn't see that little twist coming where Sitwell and the security guards were setting a trap for the Maggia. So the security guards that they gassed turned out to be life model decoys, and everybody was just sitting in the vault waiting for the Maggia to strike, which I didn't see coming. I don't know why. I probably could have guessed, but I just didn't think about it. And this was a really good issue for character development and growth. All of the characters really felt surprisingly human, especially for a superhero comic. So good job, Archie Goodwin. This was really good. Although with that, it was a bit wordy, which can take away from some of the awesome art, but I also don't mind a whole lot of reading in my comics, so that was okay. Overall, I guess I'd give this one probably 4 out of 5 stars, and I should really come up with something more interesting than stars to rate these comics with. I don't know, I'll come up with something eventually, but for now, stars, 4 out of 5 stars. Iron Man number 8. Let's move on. Next up, we've got Marvel Superheroes number 18. This one is from January of 1969, written by Arnold Drake and drawn by Gene Colan, one of my favorites. So I'm super excited to talk about this one. Previously, Marvel Superheroes has been sort of hit or miss. Some awesome heroes like Captain Marvel have debuted here, but there have also been some real stinkers from guys like the Black Knight. This issue, however, was a lot of fun. It's set in the year 3007 and follows the adventures of Charlie 27, Major Vance Astro, Martin X, and Yondu. Of course, I'm talking about the Guardians of the Galaxy. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably know that the original Guardians are nothing like those found in the excellent movie franchise, although they did have a cameo at the end of Volume 2. This issue is an origin story, focusing on the invasion of various human space colonies by green, warmongering aliens known as the Badoon. The stocky, wide-set Charlie 27 returns home to Jupiter to find that it has been taken over by these aliens. He manages to escape to Pluto, where he meets Martin X, a Plutonian whose body is covered in a crystal-like skin. Meanwhile, on Earth, Major Vance Astro and his partner Yondu are captured by the Badoon. Astro's memory is probed, establishing his backstory. He was an astronaut from the year 1988 who was sent on a 1,000-year journey to find a new human colony. However, when he awoke, he found it to be already populated by humans, making his voyage essentially worthless. He wears a copper foil bodysuit to keep his body from aging. To quote the man himself, "One puncture and I'd age 1,000 years in a second." Not sure how he eats, though. Astro and Yondu eventually escape thanks to Yondu's magical flying arrow that responds to his whistles. Both pairs of heroes eventually meet up and kick some alien butt, thus forming the Guardians of the Galaxy. Unfortunately, they would not be featured in another comic book for about 5 years, which really stinks for me because I enjoyed this one a lot, and I think I looked it up and it's about 1,000 more issues in the order here until I get to see him again. So that kind of stinks. Granted, I could cheat and just read a little more, but I'm going to stick to the order and keep things how I've been doing. So a few things I liked about this one, although there's a lot that I liked about it. It's the start of what is now one of the most iconic superhero teams. Now, before the movie franchise, they were pretty... Well, they were known within the comic community, but no one really outside of that was aware of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So it was seen as kind of a risk to make them into a movie. But now they're super iconic, and this was the start of all of that. So it was really great in that sense. The action was pretty intense and very consistent throughout. There was not really any dull moments, so that was pretty nice. And of course, I love me a good backstory. So that flashback scene with Vance Astro was more than welcome. There wasn't really much I disliked, but I do have to nitpick and say that I really didn't care for the art in this one. I usually love Gene Colan's art, but for some reason he was definitely not at the top of his game here, and I'm not really sure why. Maybe he just didn't want to do this one, but he was forced to anyway. I don't know the story behind it, but also Charlie 27's look is kind of wide and a little dumb looking. I don't know. Now, in the current comics, if you look at him, he doesn't look that stupid, but he kind of looks dumb in these early ones. I understand their thought behind making him so wide because he's from Jupiter where there's a lot of gravity and he's got to be kind of stocky and have big bones in order to move through the gravity, but it comes off as kind of funny rather than serious, although it's a comic book, so I shouldn't really be taking it too seriously in the first place. I don't know. Either way, I really enjoyed this issue despite not really caring for the art too much. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 stars just for how awesome it was. Next up, we've got Daredevil number 47 from December of 1968. This one was written by Stan Lee himself, and the art was by my favorite, Gene Colan. This one starts off in kind of a strange place, Vietnam. Daredevil is performing for the troops, including a recently blinded man named William Lincoln. After the show, Daredevil stops by Willie's hospital room for a visit and tells him to look up Matt Murdock when he gets back to the States. Of course, Willie does indeed seek out his legal services. It turns out that Willie was fired from the police force after being framed for taking a bribe by a mob boss. Eventually, some mobsters come to kill Bill, but Daredevil is there to stop them. For what seems like the first time, both of Daredevil's lives are tangled into the same story. Murdock tells Willie that he is also blind and manages to be a success, leading to a change in the way Willie looks at his life. Towards the end, Daredevil beats up more mob guys in the dark and convinces them that it was Willie that beat them up. Therefore, they'll leave him alone for fear of getting beat up again or something. This is one of the rare times that an early Marvel comic tries to have a heartfelt story. That being said, this type of story is not for everyone, myself included. I felt like the plot was going in 3 different directions, and it just wasn't all that interesting to me. I don't mind comics with a little more emotional depth, but this one just felt forced. That, and there were no fun villains, just generic mobsters. For me, Gene Colan's art was one of the only redeeming factors. I'll give this one 2 out of 5 stars. And I peeked ahead to Daredevil number 48, and Stiltman is on the cover, so I know I'll enjoy that next one. Because for some reason I love Stiltman. He's too corny, and just, I feel like he encompasses everything that the early Marvel comics were. Just complete ridiculousness. Finishing off this episode here, we've got 3 issues of Submariner, numbers 9 through 11, from January through March 1969. And the writer for all 3 of these was Roy Thomas, and the artist was Gene Colan. Wow, he seemed to do a lot in these days. I feel like every other issue I've been reading has been Gene Colan. But that's alright. So these 3 issues tell a complete story, so instead of going over each one individually, I figured I'd just do one quick synopsis for the whole thing. This story arc deals with that enchanted helmet that Namor took from Destiny before he died a few issues ago. After taking it back from the Thing, he takes it back to Atlantis, where it morphs from a purple Y shape to a green helmet with a bunch of snakes coming off of it. Namor leaves on a quest for something to cure Tiger Shark for some reason, and when he returns, Atlantis has turned against him yet again. Lady Dorma has put on the snake hat and is now a ruler/priestess of something or someone called Naga. Namor escapes, puts on the helmet, and is shown a vision of Naga and another tribe of underwater humanoids. The helmet is then stolen by Carthon the Quester, a man from this other tribe called the Lemurians. After a fight, Carthon tells Namor about how the helmet was made in Lemuria to give everlasting life to its king, the serpent-like Naga. Naga ruled for thousands of years before the helmet was stolen. After this, Namor and Carthon are captured by a pirate named Captain Barracuda, who we last saw fighting the Human Torch and Iceman back in Strange Tales number 120. He steals the helmet and launches a nuclear torpedo at an American ship. Carthon ends up breaking out and stealing back the helmet and fleeing with it, so Namor has to make the decision to pursue him or stop the torpedo. Of course, he goes after the torpedo because he can't let any innocents die. The ship's crew thinks that Namor is a threat and doesn't believe that he's there to help. Because of this, he spends half the issue beating people up and destroying a ship. Captain Barracuda ends up stealing a device from the ship that changes the direction of torpedoes somehow, and then fires one at Namor. In probably the dumbest resolution ever, Captain Barracuda accidentally turns the device on, causing the torpedo to turn around and hit his sub instead. The saga ends with Submariner swimming off towards Lemuria in pursuit of Carthon. So this arc was pretty good until that 3rd issue there. It just felt like filler having Namor destroying that ship, and the ending with the torpedo was pretty awful. Although I did enjoy the amount of backstory and lore this arc showed. It was cool to find out that there's another tribe of underwater people out there. Overall, the art was really good, which I feel is a standard for the Submariner comics. This 3-issue arc deserves a solid 3 stars. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of Journey into Marvel. You might have noticed for this episode I went unscripted for a few of the reviews, and I'm just trying to kind of figure out the way I want to do this show. If I want to do completely unscripted or completely scripted, or kind of continue what I've been doing, which is like half unscripted, half scripted. So just bear with me while I try and figure it out and work out all the kinks. There'll be some definite continuity in the future with the format here. If you have any questions or comments or anything about anything, you can always email me at metalsciencegeek@gmail.com. Alright, I think that's it for this episode. So I'll see you guys again next time. As always, you guys have been awesome, and I'm going to go read some more comics.